The story of Saint Matthew the Apostle.
Subscribe to our channel to receive more content like this.
Let me tell you a story, an old one, but one that still speaks to people today. It's about a man named Matthew. You might know him as Saint Matthew, one of Jesus' 12 apostles, and the writer of the first gospel in the New Testament. But before all that, Matthew was, well, let's just say, not exactly the most popular guy in town. Imagine a busy street in ancient Israel over 2,000 years ago. People walk by, trading goods, chatting in the marketplace, and there, sitting at a table, is Matthew, collecting taxes. Now, here's the thing. Tax collectors back then weren't just doing a boring government job. They were seen as traitors. Why? Because they worked for the Romans, who were occupying the land. And to make it worse, many tax collectors were known to cheat people, charging more than they were supposed to and pocketing the extra for themselves. So, as far as society was concerned, Matthew was a sinner. He was the kind of guy people would cross the street to avoid. One day, while Matthew was sitting at his tax booth, something unexpected happened. A man named Jesus walked by. He looked right at Matthew and said just 2 words, "Follow me." That's it. No lecture, no judgment, just an invitation. Now, Matthew could have left. He could have ignored it. He had money, power, security. Why walk away from that? But something about Jesus struck him. Maybe it was the kindness in his eyes. Maybe it was the fact that Jesus didn't see him as just a tax collector, but as a person, someone worth calling. So Matthew stood up and followed him. Just like that, he left everything behind. Later, Matthew threw a big dinner party at his house. But this wasn't a fancy religious gathering. He invited his friends, other tax collectors, outcasts, people society looked down on. And guess who came? Jesus did. This shocked the religious leaders of the time. They saw Jesus eating with sinners and asked his disciples, "Why does your teacher eat with people like that?" But Jesus overheard them and gave an answer that still echoes today. He said, "It's not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners." In other words, Jesus came for everyone, especially those who feel lost, broken, or rejected. From that day on, Matthew wasn't just a follower. He became one of Jesus' 12 apostles. He traveled with him, learned from him, witnessed miracles, and heard Jesus' teachings firsthand. And after Jesus' death and resurrection, Matthew had a mission: to share everything he had seen and heard. That's how we got the Gospel of Matthew, the first book in the New Testament. It's where we read the Sermon on the Mount, the Beatitudes, and the Lord's Prayer. It's where Jesus is shown as the promised Messiah, the fulfillment of ancient prophecies. Matthew used his skills, not as a tax collector but as a writer, to tell the story of Jesus in a way people could understand. And even though he started off as someone society rejected, God used him in a powerful way. So, what can we learn from Matthew's story? First, no one is too far gone. Matthew wasn't perfect, far from it, but Jesus didn't wait for him to clean up his act. He called him as he was and gave him a new purpose. Second, your past doesn't define your future. Matthew's old life was about taking. His new life was about giving. His time, his talent, and eventually his life. And finally, God uses unlikely people to do incredible things. Matthew's journey, from tax collector to apostle to gospel writer, shows us that transformation is possible, that grace is real, and that when we say yes to the call, our story can become part of something much bigger. So, the next time you feel unworthy, overlooked, or like you've messed up too many times, remember Matthew. Remember that a simple invitation, "Follow me," can change everything.